Greetings citizens of the world. Trump issues declaration of war warning after U.S.-Mexico drug conflict death toll soars over 280,000. A gravely worded new Ministry of Defense, MOD, report circulating in the Kremlin today says that as part of the deconfliction protocols established between Russia and the United States to lessen the likelihood of either nation misunderstanding the reasons behind massive troop deployments, the U.S. Department of Defense, DoD, has informed the Office of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation that the full-scale exercise between 2024 August of U.S. Army forces deployed at Camp Zama, Japan, is to test their readiness to deploy in support of the United States Northern Command, a North comment that was followed by President Donald Trump cryptically announcing that drugs flowing into the U.S. from Mexico is now a form of warfare, a gross understatement as the U.S. mainstream propaganda media hidden drug war between these two nations now has a two-year death toll exceeding over 280,000, with 2016 U.S. drug deaths reported being 63,632, and 2017 one soaring to a new record of over 72,000. But whose catastrophic numbers are exceeded by those in Mexico, whose staggering dead and missing toll is now over 150,000. English. According to this report, U.S. Army forces at Camp Zama are under the command of United States Forces Japan, USFJ, that is a subordinate command of the United States Indo-Pacific Command, USINDOPACOM, that, likewise, commands United States Forces Korea, USFK, and should war break out on the Korean Peninsula, would see the highly specialized U.S. Army Intelligence and U.S. Army Corps of Engineer Forces at Camp Zama deploy to begin establishing and building new borders. In the U.S. Department of Defense, knowing that any mass movement of these highly specialized Camp Zama border-building forces could be interpreted by the Russian Federation that a major conflict on the Korean Peninsula was being prepared for by the Americans, this report explains, the DoD notification to the MOD that this full-scale exercise was to test these military forces' readiness to deploy to the United States Northern Command kept misunderstandings from arising, most particularly as the U.S. Northern Command is tasked with providing military support for civil authorities in the U.S., and protecting the territory and national interests of the United States within the contiguous United States, Alaska, not Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Canada, Mexico, the Bahamas, and the air, land and sea approaches to these areas, and is the U.S. military command which, if applicable, would be the primary defender against a mainland invasion of the United States. As fears began to arise in early June within the MOD that the U.S. was preparing military action in Mexico, as Communist Socialist Andrés Manuel López Obrador, known as AMLO, was nearing his historic election victory in a Mexican nation whose war conflict zone is the second worst in the world, only exceeded by Syria, this report says, President Putin ordered a massive Russian naval fleet to sail into the Atlantic Ocean waters off the Americas to monitor the events occurring there, and whose war fears grew to alarming levels in late June after AMLO threatened to flood the United States with tens of millions of refugees. Most concerning to new Mexican leader AMLO, causing him to threaten overrun the United States with tens of millions of refugees, this report explains, was the Bush-Obama regime instigated and paid for war on Mexico's powerful drug cartels, that, since 2008, has seen the U.S. give $2.7 billion to Mexico through the initiative to help shape Mexico's security policy, and the U.S. Department of Defense give millions more in its work with the Mexican military, but whose results have totally failed, as did their Bush-Obama-Clinton-instigated wars on Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Ukraine and Libya, turning once vibrant nations into failed states. So catastrophic, in fact, has this Bush-Obama-Clinton war in Mexico become, this report documents. Since it began, the effects have been devastating, as there has been over 127,000 organized crime-related murders, on top of the tens of thousands of people who have disappeared, with Mexico recording more murders in 2017 than in any other year in modern history, and whose 2018 murder rate is already up another 14%. As President Trump had done to the consternation of his deep state enemies with North Korea, with his fist preparing for war, then offering peace, this report details, In late June he recalled nearly all of his nation's supercarriers to their U.S. ports to begin the preparation for a full-scale invasion of Mexico, but that saw him, a week later, extend an olive branch to the communist socialist AMLO and saying, "Congratulations to Andrés Manuel López Obrador on becoming the next president of Mexico. I look very much forward to working with him. There is much to be done that will benefit both the United States and Mexico." Choosing wisely, like North Korean leader Kim Jong-un had done, to accept President Trump's carrot, rather than his stick, this report notes, AMLO has worked feverishly over these past few weeks with Trump to achieve peace, and whose success of now sees the United States and Mexico nearing an historic trade deal, as well as AMLO proposing a radical new way to end his nation's drug war using peaceful, rather than military, means, and that Trump is accepting and further pledging that the U.S. will prevent more guns from going to Mexico. Not being told to the American people by their mainstream propaganda media about the only way to stop the apocalyptic war in Mexico, whose U.S. Mexican lives cost is now over 280,000 during the past 2 years alone, this report points out, is that the only way this can be achieved is by the massive securing of the U.S.-Mexico border, that will keep drugs from entering the U.S., while at the same keeping guns from flowing into Mexico, and whose actual responsibility for defending is not U.S. federal or state police forces, but the United States Northern Command, but with barely any of the American people knowing that, since the mid-19th century, the United States has frequently employed the U.S. Army on the Mexican border to perform various roles in support of the nation, from outright war, to patrolling the border, to chasing bandits while securing persons and property on both sides of the border. Also not being told to the American people about President Trump by their mainstream propaganda media, this report continues, is that, as Commander-in-Chief, he is actually the Supreme Commander of the United States Northern Command, and whose solemn U.S. constitutional oath he took upon becoming president mandates that he protect American lives and his nation's borders, neither of which he is presently doing, but that by all measurable instances Trump is about to change. Vowing to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border since he first began running for office in 2015, this report says, the American people have been continually misled by their mainstream propaganda media into believing that President Trump needs the U.S. Congress to appropriate the money needed to build it, but that comes nowhere near the truth, as Trump, with his powers as Commander-in-Chief, and being in command of the U.S. Northern Command, can, at any time he so chooses, declare a national emergency and begin building whatever he wants. The money President Trump needs to build this wall, this report explains, is contained in a virtually unknown U.S. Department of Defense budget allocation already approved by the U.S. Congress in the hundreds of billions of dollars called the Other Transaction Authority, OTA, that is more commonly known as the black hole of the Pentagon budget, as its expenditures are some of the most secret the U.S. military makes, but whose most important beneficiary is the equally little known about U.S. military office called the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, DIUX. Most important to know about the U.S. military's Defense Innovation Unit Experimental Unit, this report explains, is that shortly after President Trump took office, they detailed to him that a border wall across the entire U.S.-Mexico border would in no way stop the flow of drugs from Mexico into the United States, as Mexican drug cartels had switched to using drones that no wall could stop the overflights of, no matter how tall, that were increasingly discovered to be weaponized with explosives, and whose reach has now extended to electric car maker Tesla's Gigafactory in Nevada that's now become a major Mexican drug distribution center, and whose shocking revelation have caused already under pressure Tesla's billionaire tech giant owner Elon Musk to admit that he was fraying. Not fraying, however, in the new reality of the Mexican drug cartel drone dangers now faced by the U.S. that no border wall could defeat. This report continues, President Trump, using his supreme powers as Commander-in-Chief, authorized the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental to spend billions of dollars to rapidly acquire the means to defeat them, and has seen over the past 18 months the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental using Other Transaction Authority black hole money to, in part, fund the drone, who protects from malicious unmanned aerial systems, UAS, by securing the airspace using advanced hardware and software technology. Airspace Systems, that offers a drone security solution capable of identifying, tracking, and autonomously removing rogue drones from the sky. Applied Minds, that develops an unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV, to intercept adversarial as based on a standard platform, with various modifications and enhancements to decrease the time to target and increase the likelihood of success. Citadel Defense Company, that delivers an automated solution that detects threats, and tracks and intercepts unauthorized drones in restricted airspace. Saildrone, that designs and manufactures wind and solar-powered autonomous surface vehicles called Saildrones for persistent maritime awareness, which make cost-effective ocean data collection possible at scale. As traditionally, collecting maritime data is challenging and manned vessels are expensive, they cannot be in enough places at once, and cannot reach certain areas. Additional authorizations made by President Trump for Defense Innovation Unit experimental expenditures that show the direction he is going in, as it pertains to the protecting of the American people from their common deep state enemies, this report notes, is the funding of Sonitus Technologies, that provides a wireless, hands-free, two-way communications device that is hidden in the mouth and uses the bone that connects the teeth to the ear canal, and Yubico, who makes the YubiKey, a small USB multi-protocol authentication device now needed to access control of all U.S. Department of Defense computer and network systems that allows Trump to know, on a second-by-second basis, who is accessing his nation's most closely guarded secrets, and since whose first use now sees the Pentagon putting a blackout on where U.S. troops are, as well they're punishing mainstream propaganda media reporters who in the past saw no problems with disclosing U.S. military secrets. To why President Trump would want to keep to the U.S. mainstream propaganda media from knowing American troop locations, as well as giving U.S. troops a secret way to communicate with each other, and then severely restricting who has access to their information, this report says, is more than likely due to the U.S. Army Intelligence and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers border building experts who traveled from their Japanese base Camp Zama to the U.S.-Mexico border this past May, and whose over 5-week visit was followed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers sending letters to various landowners in South Texas notifying them that their land was going to be used to build Trump's wall. 2. And President Trump will bring about the full militarization of the U.S.-Mexico border in order to protect the American people, whom he's sworn by oath to protect, this report concludes, appears to be nearing, especially after Trump, yesterday, erupted in public during a meeting of his cabinet declaring that the catastrophic drug deaths of his citizens is almost a form of warfare and his vowing that we can stop it, and who, also, aside from his preparations on his nation's southern border, further directly ordered his Attorney General Jeff Sessions to start filing criminal charges against America's vile drug makers, the most notorious of whom is the OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma that, as revealed in a state of Tennessee ongoing trial against them, revealed that their company founders and executives pressed its sales team to push Tennessee doctors to prescribe deadly dosages of OxyContin on a long-term basis while lying to doctors about the dangers, and, between 2007 and 2012, sent more than 780 million pills of their deadly drug into West Virginia, which roughly equals 433 pills for every man, woman and child in the state, all while being protected by Hillary Clinton, whom they lavished with hundreds of millions of dollars while the best of America's youth were left to die horrible deaths, but that one can only hope Trump, and those Americans supporting him, will be able to successfully battle against to save before more innocent lives are lost.